hear you, but I can't see you, but that's okay.
All right. Well, what we're doing tonight, we have 3 tutors with us who have been with literacy volunteers for a long time. They both taught English as a second language and basic literacy. Jack Mcgann was our tutor trainer for years. He retired, but he's still tutoring. Jack's been with the organization since, I believe he told me, the mid-'80s, almost since the beginning. So he knows as much about this organization as anybody does, and he's done as much tutoring with a wide variety of students as just about anybody has. So we're going to open it up with Jack. Jack's got some tips. The idea is tonight for these people who have been tutoring to talk about what works for them, what hasn't worked, some of the things you might run into, and then at the end everybody can ask questions. So Jack, would you like to go ahead and start?
All right. I even turned off my mute button. One of the things that I thought I was really impressed with on literacy volunteers' techniques was the stress on sight words. And sight words are words that the reader knows instantly. You know, there's some words that you look at and you don't even have to think about them. Other words, you have to kind of tear them apart and figure out what the letters are and all that. But on sight words, you don't even look at the letters. You just see a whole unit and you recognize it right away. Good readers have thousands of sight words. And one of the reasons I want to stress this is because most people don't think about reading that way. When they think about teaching reading, they think about the alphabet and all that stuff. Most of our adult learners have a pretty good idea about most of the alphabet. There'll be a few letters that they don't know, but what we really need is to get some sight words and a large number of sight words. And one of the techniques that we use in literacy volunteers, especially, I don't know how it's going to work with the remote learning, is to make little cards. We'd cut 4 3x5 cards into 4 parts and store them in those little boxes that checkbooks used to come in. And students would write words on them, and then they, while you're not tutoring them during the week, several times they could go through the words and try to learn them, and that you can use them like flashcards. And I think that's a really helpful thing if you can get your student to make, the student would have to make the cards himself or herself, it's a, or perhaps you can email them a page of words and such. But I think that that's a really important technique, that increasing the number of sight words is really important for students, and flashcards was a very good way of doing it. Now, the other thing that that we didn't get to on Saturday that's really important, or really impressed me at least, in literacy volunteers techniques is called the language experience approach. And the idea is that you get your student to tell you something, some little story, some part of, you're sitting there talking to him or her, finding out what their life is like. And you hear an interesting part, and you take a couple of sentences and you write them down. And then you teach the student to read that. Now, one of the reasons that that's really helpful is that besides knowing how to figure out the words and knowing this, even if you have all the words as sight words, sometimes people can arrange words in ways that you can't make meaning out of them. And in order to, I should go back and talk about the mind. Our memory has several different stages. There's a instantaneous memory, or a very quick memory where we know everything. When you close your eyes, you can still see that scene in front of you, but it only lasts for a fraction of a second. And then we transfer into longer term memory those things which we have assigned some meaning to. And so we need to get through this. When we're reading something, we need to get through enough of the sentence to make meaning out of it. Otherwise, we don't recall it. And so if we have to struggle through decoding each word, by the time we get to the end of the sentence, we don't know what the beginning of the sentence was saying. And so the sight words are really important for people, and the idea of reading fluently through the whole sentence, skip the words you don't know, go back and figure them out from the context or something else. So those are techniques that are very helpful, but at least if you are teaching somebody to read something that they told you, then they know the words, and they know what the words mean and how they fit together. And so you're concentrating on that part that is missing for them, that is turning the printed or written symbols into ideas. So those are a couple things I wanted to talk about because they were, to me, the fundamental ideas of literacy volunteers. The other sort of liberating thing that came from literacy volunteers techniques was that when you are working on letters, you teach students through rote learning and memory only the consonant sounds. Most of the consonants have just one sound. There are several of them that have two different sounds, or three, like the G's in garage. But most of the consonants only have one particular sound that they stand for, whereas the vowels, almost every vowel in the English language has 7 or 8 different ways of pronouncing it, and sometimes it depends on what you mean by the word. Think of the I or in minute and minute. And so one of the ways that you teach vowel sounds is by using word patterns, which are little parts of words and that have vowels in them, and you find rhyming things. You say, here's cake. Now, what if I took off the C and put an L in front of it, or took off the L and put an M in front of it? And so you can use those word patterns to teach people to recognize words. But with the vowels, it's a much more productive technique than trying to memorize the sounds of vowels, because they vary a tremendous amount. Now lately, I have not been tutoring basic reading. I have a couple of older Syrian immigrants. Actually, one of them's been here 6 years and the other for several years less than that. The older one is actually a US citizen, and this will be the first year he gets to vote. And I'm working with them just on the telephone. One of the things I found was we got a book that we both had, and we started reading it, and he reads to me, and I help him with the reading part and improve his English usage as he goes along. And he really enjoys that, and I do too. And the book we're reading is Roald Dahl's book, The Witches. It's about some kid who his grandmother tells him all about witches, and then he accidentally gets stuck in a great big hall where there's witches are meeting. The witches turn him into a mouse. It's an interesting story. But anyway, Waleed really enjoys. We read about a half hour to 3/4 of an hour, maybe a chapter, 3 or 4 pages at a time on the phone. My other student, I'm working with him on the telephone. I would like to get both of them more active in writing things, but they are really bashful. It's evidently pretty hard for people who are not well versed in English to write things in English. And I'm having trouble convincing them to write stuff. So that's one of the difficulties of working on the telephone, I think. My other student, he and I just talk mostly about literature. He is widely read. He conned me into buying a book by André Malraux, a French author. He told me about a history of the Arabic people, and but anyway, we just talk, and I have really gotten more out of this student than I think I've granted him, but he really likes just talking because it helps his English. Susan?
Yeah, I wanted to add something about the sight words. I have used that long distance with my student. What I taught her the days of the week and the months of the year and colors. And what I did, I got some construction paper and I wrote down, say, the days of the week on little pieces of paper on orange construction paper. And then I numbered each one with a little number in the corner. And I made an identical set for myself. I sent her the set and said, okay, get your orange cards out. Tell me what number 4 is. Tell me what number 3 is. And we went over them and over them until she had them in her head. Then I'd say, okay, get the blue set out. These are months of the year. And we'd repeat the same thing. Get number 3 on the blue card. Tell me what it is. And we went through several series of things like this, and it worked very well. We tutor on the phone, and I did all this through the mail, and it worked just fine. It was very easy, and it seemed to be very effective.
If you really want to send your students stuff, if they have an email, that would be a very helpful thing. But then that's not something you can do right away. But you send them something and then you work on it the next time you deal with them.
But she didn't have any way to print things out, so that's why I sent her
right.
the printed cards.
Yeah, a lot of our
And
students don't have many resources. Excuse me, Susan.
Right, just what you were saying about the students not having many resources. Yeah. That is true.
And it's sort of difficult you need to avoid putting them in a bad light, making them feel bad about their resources or their knowledge. As much as possible, you need to be showing them how successful they are at doing the things you're trying to teach them. Does somebody else need a turn to talk?
I'll just say one thing that is very important is trying to get material that your student is interested in. You never want an adult to be reading children's books unless their reason for reading is to read to their kids or their grandkids. There are plenty of materials, and BA has a list of resources prepared for you that are adult themes written for what they call new readers, people who are just starting to read. I had a student who was, I think he was about 55, 56. He was a roofer. He'd worked all his life, had his own business. wanted to learn to read better because he was asked to read out loud in church. And I brought in some textbooks that we had that are written for adults in simple language, and they talked about things that I thought he could identify with. Gardening, getting a pickup truck stuck in the mud, going to a farmer's market. And he was so thankful. He thanked me every lesson. He said the last tutor I had me reading about little chicks and bunnies. And he said, I couldn't take reading kids' books. That, it insulted his intelligence. And he was so thankful just to have material that he could identify with it, but he could understand it too. He could read it. And we have lots of material like that. It sometimes takes a while to figure out what interests your student, but you just kind of keep working at it. Maybe they get a magazine that they really like the pictures, but they can't read the stories. Or maybe they'd like to keep up with the news, but they really can't. They have AOL, but they can't read the news because they can't read well enough. Just after you talk to them and you work with them, you'll figure out what motivates them. Because the more they can read something interesting, the more motivated they will be. The student I have right now, she's a young woman. She has a learning disability, but she watches a lot of TV and a lot of made-for-TV movies, and she's on Facebook all the time. So she's interested in current themes that young people are involved in. Drugs, the danger of drugs, gangs, the dangers of gangs, things that are interesting that she sees on TV and she wants to know more about. But they're written in little booklets that are very, very simple. And since I found those for her, she's started reading a lot more enthusiastically. And she'll say, can we read a little more? I want to see what's going to happen to this guy. Is he going to go to jail or not? So that's good. She's interested. She sees a reason for reading. And we'll help you find some of those types of material. But you have to gear it towards your student because they're all different.
Susan,
Mary, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I had a student who was a driver for Advanced Auto. So I found an auto parts catalog and we read that. We read other things, but that was something. So don't overlook the junk mail that you get, an Office Max catalog. There are things in there that that you can probably use.
Good ideas.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
My first student was a high school student who was having difficulty, and he was really good at deciphering words, but he didn't have very many sight words, and he really didn't like the whole business of learning sight words. And so we just tried to find other things. And I had some little golden books that my children had. Some of them were fairly sophisticated. And I had one about, I took him to the library and he showed an interest in that. I thought he wanted to learn about sports and stuff. But anyway, he really cared about dinosaurs. So I found this little golden book about dinosaurs. And at that time with him, I was stressing paraphrasing. That is, read a sentence or a paragraph and then write it out in your own words, different words from whatever you read, to be sure that you understand the meaning of it. And so we were doing a couple of paragraphs in this little golden book about dinosaurs, and we finished our hour, and he said, could I take this book home with me? And I said, yeah, sure. A week later, he came back. He had paraphrased the entire book and had redrawn, not cut, traced, but actually drew all the pictures in the book. He had recreated the book, in other words, and redrawn all the pictures. You just never know what it is that's going to interest someone. I had a student at the jail, and he was on the other side of a glass. And the jail people said I could bring him stuff, but I couldn't bring him if I wanted to give him a pad, it could not have staples in it. It had to be just glued together. And the jail people had a lot of rules. Anyway, I found some books. I went to Taylor Books and other used books places, and I found a couple copies of Huckleberry Finn, and I thought, oh, he'll really like this. He's probably about 20, 22, and his family was into drugs and gambling and stuff. But so I brought this book in, and I got the guards to give him a copy. So we had a copy on each side of the glass, and he was reading through it. And so he had the book with him. The next week, 2 weeks later, I came. We kept working with this book, and the next week he said his partner or his cellmate and he were taking turns reading it, just as he and I had. 2 weeks later, he said, "Could we get some more copies of that Huckleberry Finn book?" He said, "All the guys in my pod are taking turns reading it."
Wow. Mary Rose, what are you working on with your students?
Okay, I had 3 students, but I'm not working with 2 now because one is a little boy that needs, he's got cerebral palsy and I had to sit with him, so we cannot do that. The other lady, she has 2 little babies and she doesn't have time to do. So I'm working with a Syrian lady over the phone, and she's an intelligent lady. I think, Jack, I think you're working with her husband, I think. Because she told me that, you know, her husband needed someone. But anyway, my student is just an intelligent lady, but she would like to be able to have a conversation and be understood. So we are doing mostly conversation over the telephone, and it's amazing that in the last few months that I've been working with her, that I can understand her much better and she can understand me much better. First of all, she likes my accent because it's not difficult to understand my accent compared to the West Virginian accent, which I completely understand. So we work. She had trouble understanding a workman that came to the house, and there was a problem in her apartment, and she was trying to explain to him what the problem was. He couldn't understand what she was saying, and she couldn't understand what he was saying. So we are concentrating on just speaking and understanding. And then, since I came many, many years ago from India, I spoke English when I came. But my problem when I came to Charleston was being able to talk to somebody on the telephone. They couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand them. So I tell my student now that she has to pick up the telephone and she has to call, whether it's Lowe's or Walmart or CVS, and talk to someone and ask them to please put me to this department. I need to look for find something. So she has to have a conversation. She was a little afraid to do that before, and I said, no, you have to do that. And so she has done that. So conversation on the telephone, conversation with people. Now during this pandemic, she doesn't get to see too many people, but she met her neighbor and she talked to her from afar and was able to have a conversation and be understood. Now she's working with, I think she's doing, Garnet, where she's on Zoom And so so now we have this whole new subject where I'm helping her with her work. She studies idioms, and then she doesn't understand any of them because that's slow. The words, you know how it is when you say, strike the iron while it's hot, and she has no idea what that means. So we work on that. And then she had a report to write, like the person you admire the most. And so I worked with her on that. She would look up Wikipedia, she started to write, and then we used to go over it. So she would read her report and I would correct. And it was not just the written, she had to also speak and, present the report on Zoom like this with the rest of her class. So I'm working with her with that, and we're doing pretty well. We discuss recipes. She asks me every day what I'm cooking for dinner, and then I ask her what she's cooking for dinner. So she gives me the recipe of her Mediterranean, dishes, and she asks me about my Indian cooking, and so we just keep the conversation going. And I correct her if she makes any mistakes, and her grammar and some of the words, and we're doing. I think I'm doing just exactly what she wants. She's intelligent, she's educated, but English was not her first language, and she's good at writing, and but she just wants to improve her speaking skills, and so that's what I've been doing.
Very good. Pam,
Yes, ma'am.
what have you been working on?
Well, I don't have a student at the moment, but I do have some things that I could share with you about things I've done in the past. I'm going to maybe go in a little different direction than your other presenters. I will emphasize something that Jack said about the word families, like you have, he mentioned AKE, and then you put different letters in front of it to make cake or make or bake or whatever. I find that that's a good exercise maybe at the end of a session, if the student has been very intense and focused on reading that's difficult for them. You have to understand that reading is difficult for our students. So maybe something a little lighter, and we can actually make a game of it. The student provides a letter, I provide a letter. How many words can you make back and forth? And it's just a lighter exercise, but at the same time, they're learning something. So I want to emphasize that. Something else that I do is I put maybe 2 paragraphs of an article in front of the person and tell them to read it silently and to underline or mark any words they don't know. And then those become their vocabulary words. Sometimes they breeze through without having any words underlined. Sometimes it's several words. And so we talk about those. Then I have them write sentences with those words. We have a spelling test. They have to write each word 5 times every day. So it becomes grooved in. And they become spelling words. And these become maybe basis of a story that they're going to make later on. Depending on how well they can deal with that one paragraph, those 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph may be all they deal with that week. If they're handling that well, then we move on and do some more. But that's kind of a process I use. Small chunk of an article, what words do we need to work on? Have exercises to work on those words that become vocabulary. We go back and have them read the article out loud again, talk about its meaning, comprehension, and so forth. I'm going to see if I can pull up something here because I'm made oh, okay, I can't do that. It's disabled. All right, I have some books. Susan was talking about materials that are appropriate for adults, but still on a low readability level. And I've got several here that I have used and are recommending, and I've got them in a bibliography that I will give you my email afterwards. And if you want me to, I will be glad to send these to you so that you can have this list and not have to try to write everything down. The first one is called Differentiated Nonfiction Reading. And I don't know, can you see that? Sort of.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a series of books. There are actually from grades 2 to 6. I have grade 2 here. They are one-page articles, like here. I don't know how I can get that, you can see it. One-page articles, and then there's a worksheet on the other side that asks questions about it. And the sections involved with this, it's in sections, science, geography, history, and language arts. And they're articles that are appropriate for adults. Another book I use is called Wonder Stories. And there's a series of these grades 1 through 5. These are short articles. I have grade 2, and you might be able to see it's just a short article, and then there's some questions at the bottom. This is good when, well, this is grade 2, so this is lower level, but they're not strenuous. They're not long articles that are taxing. Another book that I've used is called Step Up to Reading, and this is more for vocabulary, for grammar, and so forth. There are sections on vocabulary which include things like prefixes, suffixes, antonyms, synonyms, etc. A section on reference skills, on alphabetizing, table of contents, comprehension, and some literature elements having to do with the author's purpose and so forth. So this one is actually kind of auxiliary to reading, but I also do a lot of writing, you know, a sentence structure, nouns, verbs, punctuation. I try to get them writing as well as reading. So I do emphasize a lot on those kinds of things. This one is called Document-Based Questions. And this is a fun one because it is based on actual events, things that have been in the newspaper. There are for grades 3 through 5. I happen to have grade 4, and the contents in grade 4 are survival stories. One of them being Mary Ingalls and her trip through West Virginia, escaping, so it's pertinent for here. Another category is incredible disasters like the flu pandemic in 1918. Great adventures, amazing discoveries like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and interesting places. So again, very appropriate for adult readers. Another book is called Master Skills English 4, like here. And again, this is parts of speech, punctuation, that kind of thing. But one of the things I found valuable in this book are worksheets on words like well and good. Which time do you use good? What time do you use well? A worksheet on your and your, Y-O-U-R and Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. The 2 its, the 3 theirs, sit and set. Those I've not seen anyplace else, but there are also words that are mixed up frequently, especially in West Virginia culture, I think. So that's another book. Reading Comprehension and Skills is another book about grammar and comprehension. I've got book 4. Again, this has to do with vocabulary and prefixes and suffixes, symbolism, social studies. There are articles on social studies in this. And another one that I've used a lot is called High Interest, Low Readability, Extreme Places. These are true places in the world, such as the Bay of Fundy, the Panama Canal, the Dead Sea, and so forth. This book is on a 4th grade reading level. They are full page, sometimes 2-page articles, and then have worksheets that go with it to check for comprehension. And the last one I have that I'm not sure is even in publication anymore is called Easy Reading Selections in English. And these are, this is actually for an advanced reader because it's kind of, I don't know if you can see that, it's kind of dense wording on the page. There aren't really pictures. But what is good about this is that these are short stories that are well known. For example, O. Henry's The Last Leaf, and Mark Twain, The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, Rip Van Winkle, The Lady or the Tiger. So these are classic short stories. They're a few pages long, so I tend to divide them up and not give them all at once. But interspersed in the stories are questions that they have to answer, and then it checks their comprehension again. So those are some books that I have found very valuable. And at this time when it's not easy to get into the office to get or even look at some of the resources that are there, I have found that I have accumulated a little bit of my own library. And I have on these papers the contact information, the websites where you can get these books. So let me give you my email, because what I will do, if you are interested in having this list, email me and I will be glad to email it back to you, send it back to you. My email is huntgen, HUNTGEN @AOL.com. I'll repeat that. HUNTGEN @AOL.com. And so I've got all the information on this and I'll be glad to give it to you. Another thing I'll just mention, I was going to try to show it to you, but I don't have the capability here. I make up worksheets for students when I figure there is a certain need that they have. For example, I've made worksheets for contractions. Cannot, can't, it's, it is. And so we have a session or two on contractions because that's common, very common in reading, and they need to know what that means. And another one that I've worked up are abbreviations, and this is particularly good with ESL students. For example, what does ST mean? Well, sometimes it means street, sometimes it means saint. What are the honorifics for a man, for a married woman, for an unmarried woman? What are the abbreviations for the days of the weeks, and that kind of thing? So if you're interested in having a copy of that, I'd be glad to send that to you as well. And that's really what I have to offer for you tonight.
Quite a bit, thank you.
You're welcome.
If anybody didn't get that email address, you can get in touch with me too, and I'll be happy to give it to you.
And I wondered, Pam, if you wouldn't mind just putting your bibliography together and emailing it to me, and because I'm sending out a packet later this week to everyone, and I can just add it to the packet as well as maybe your worksheets.
I'll be glad to do that.
Thanks. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, are you going to talk a little bit about downloading PDF books?
Yeah. So this summer I worked with 3 teenage girls who don't like to read. And I was trying to figure out what I could what kind of book. And I was thinking The House on Mango Street. And so I checked into buying the book, and it was more money than I wanted to spend. But I found that there was a PDF available online, and not only that, but there was like a lesson plan to go along with each chapter. So once I found that out, I thought, okay, what books are in the public domain? What books are on PDF? So in your packet that I'm preparing, you'll have a list of about 15 websites that have free PDF books that you can use. And I don't think that any of the websites I'm giving you have the lesson plans with them, but if you've got a book, you can just Google the name of the book and add lesson plan, and most likely you're going to find something. So that though would be for somebody who could maybe read a little bit more than our beginners. But The House on Mango Street, that is such an easy book, and because it's about immigrants, it is a book that our ESL students could relate, excuse me, could relate to. And the only two more things I want to cover. So you will get a packet, and it will have what do I do now? I've completed the training, what's next? So you're going to have that. You're going to have a list of resources. Also, we have just moved to a volunteer management system. It's cloud-based, and that is something that you'll begin to use to log in hours, because we do keep track of our hours that we spend volunteering. And that the packet I send you will have information. There are training videos, and there are written training materials. And that's my job, is to train people in the use of that, as well as other computer programs that we might be using. I don't know where I was going other than to mention that, but you will, you have to have a username and password, and I actually have given each of you a username and password, and I'll be giving you that information as well. And so I was going to tell you that it has a document library where I've been collecting either a list of resources or the actual items, you know, a book on ESL lesson planning or whatever will be in there. So the resources that you get, you're going to get a lot. And if you don't find what you want, then you heard from 3 longtime tutors, well, 4, counting Susan tonight. You heard from Jack, Mary Rose, Pam, and Susan. And you can certainly contact any of them if you get stumped. So I think that's all that I needed to cover. Can you think of anything I've left out, Susan or Melissa? Can you think of anything else?
All I would say, you're going to send instructions how the tutors can get into the database and enter their hours.
Yeah.
If people can't figure it out, you're willing to help them.
Oh yeah, yeah. I will do that. It might
You're
cost
going to
them
include
something,
your
but
emails and contact.
I'm sorry, what?
You're going to include your email, your phone, whatever.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Yeah, our office is closed, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. So it really doesn't do you any good to call or email the office. Now, one of the emails at the office goes through to BA, and she'll give you that. But eventually, we have an office in the First Presbyterian Church in Charleston. Eventually, it will be opened again. After the pandemic sometime, we will reopen. We do have a library there. We have a copier. But of course, that doesn't help us right now. Does anybody have questions? Janet?
Susan, I just, if we need to mail something to the office, will someone get the mail?
Probably not for a month. Mail
Okay,
it to
so
me. Mail it
mail
to
it to you. Okay, all right. So if I need to send some things back or something, I should just mail them to you.
yeah.
Janet, periodically, Alice Pettit is there. She picks up the bills. So she's also a source that does get some of the mail at the church.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's just resource material, if it isn't anything time sensitive, you can go ahead and send it to the church. If
Okay.
it's something like someone who wants to be a student and needs to be contacted, send that to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, I think I mentioned it the other night, we have 2 evaluators. When a student comes into the program, they are evaluated to try to help you figure out their reading, writing, and speaking level. And you will, when you are assigned a student, you will get the results from that evaluation. So you're not starting blind, you're starting with them being tested. It still takes a while to figure out exactly where your student is, but it's very helpful to have that test material. And we will get all that to you. As BA mentioned, Anita is willing to have another session to continue what we didn't get to the other night. I'm hoping that will be within 2 weeks. I will let everybody know right away. We're currently recruiting students. We have 5 students on our waiting list right now, 4 ESL and 1 basic literacy. We're only going to work with adults during the pandemic because it's just too difficult to test and deal with kids right now. Any questions? No questions, okay. Melissa, do you want to add anything? Melissa's our board president.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming and joining us. I was a tutor many years ago. It ebbs and flows as your students move on or they grow. One thing I have learned that you listen to the student and they always tell you their needs. There's always a need, whether it's finding out about 6 months into it, they don't know how to tell time, or they want to learn to drive a car, or they just want to read their kids' forms that come from school and they can't read them. But it's always a growth experience for you as the tutor as well as the student. And so the biggest thing is enjoy it, because they'll enjoy you if you enjoy the experience. And we welcome you. If you ever have questions, we are here. I'm sure that BA will give you a list of board members and email addresses. Please do not hesitate to reach out. Let us know what works and what doesn't, because we grow from that information as well. So thank you again for being here as tutors. I want to thank the tutors for sharing their experience. Pam, that was a wealth of knowledge. I know one thing, you're always looking for things, but I will tell you, there are a lot of free materials on the internet. There are interactive pages that you can do with your students. So there's a lot of opportunities with Zoom. So let us know what works. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, BA, for being here for us.
BA, do you want quickly to talk about News for You? We forgot that.
Okay. Well, News for You is a subscription news service, and it's put out by the publishing arm of Pro Literacy, which is our umbrella organization. And it's the news stories that are made a little bit simple so that our clients can read them. We had a trial subscription over the summer, and I'm going to go ahead and take probably a 15-week subscription. And when I do that, you'll all have the link. You can use that, and you can disseminate it as many times as you want for free, because that's part of our subscription. And so you might find that helpful. I know that a lot of the tutors have been sending out information on the coronavirus to their students, because people are very interested in how to be safe. So there are things that are going on in the news that our students want to know about, and this is a more readable form for them.
I will let everybody know when we're going to have the final session. If you need to or want to in between time, feel free to get a hold of me, get a hold of BA. We can try to answer any questions or help you with. One thing, we're suggesting that people use Zoom with their students, but you don't have to. Use whatever platform you and your student are comfortable with. You can do a 45-minute Zoom call for free. And most of us think 45 minutes is about as much as you're going to be able to do online to keep people's attention. But use whatever platform is comfortable for you and your student.
I've used FaceTime several times. FaceTime with my student.
And that works well?
Oh yeah, works well. Mm-hmm. She was very comfortable with that because she uses it with her grandchildren. So.
Okay, well, thank you again, everybody, for coming, and I will get the information out about the next workshop. BA will get the resources out to you.